So I put together some notes and I've been looking at different knives. I like to use BladeHQ. They're trustworthy. They have a lot of different options. I used to just stay awake late at night in bed and just scroll through knives. It's super nerdy because I guess I'm a knife nerd. Anyways, I wanted to break down the purpose of, for today's video, a pocket knife, right? And what I look for in a pocket knife. Now, everybody's different. You all have your different tastes. You have your different desires or whatever fantasy you have in your mind that you've romanticized would be cool. I do the same thing. Everybody that likes pocket knives does that, maybe even fixed blades. But in the far reaches of my mind, there's like a purpose for the knife, right? It's not just like, oh, this looks cool, or maybe it is, I don't know. But for me, there is a purpose, or at least I tell myself that, right? So I'm on BladeHQ website, and you have to bear with me. I'm learning how to use Final Cut Pro, so I'm going to show some screenshots of what I'm looking at and try to edit that in. But the whole premise is I look at 5 things when I'm looking for a knife. And I'll go through those. But number 1 is, like I said, there was a purpose. So for every blade shape, there is a purpose, right? You can have a sheep's foot, a drop point, you can look up these different blade shapes. But each blade shape has a purpose. So for example, a sheep's foot. The purpose of that blade is to cut what you want to cut and not stab something that you're trying to cut. That's why that blade is turned down, so you're less likely to stab something. If you look at a butcher knife, for example, it doesn't have a point or a point for stabbing. It's made for slicing, it's made for cutting. So the whole idea, like for me, when I look at a knife, I want to look at, number 1, what's the shape, what's the purpose I have behind it. And on a pocket knife, it's pretty simple, right? I discovered early on that I like a straight back knife. The best example of that would be the Boker Quaken, designed by Lucas Burnley. That is my favorite blade shape. Now, that was a blade shape before Lucas designed it. He put a name to it, made it famous, but you can go back in time and see countless amounts of designs and stuff like that. And he admits that he took that design from Japanese suicide blades or whatever. But the idea there is that I like my pocket knife to be, number 1, a secondary option for self-defense. So my primary option for self-defense is, concealed carry or whatever. Maybe for you it's mace or pepper spray. But my primary goal in self-defense is to stab, right? I know that sounds pretentious or violent, but I've been in some rough sides of town, and it happens sometimes. But thankfully not with me, right? So, but the potential for it to be there is there, and maybe that's pretentious for me to assume such a negative event, but hey, that's the way I think. I think about the worst case scenario, folding out, and all I have to get to is my knife. I want to make sure it's really pointy and stabby, right? That's the goal of my pocket knife. So all my pocket knives, for the most part, except for a few when I first started collecting, they're pretty pointy, they're pretty stabby, and that means that for me the size is important. Like, I want it to be at least 3.5 inches long and no longer than 4 inches, because I still want to be able to comfortably carry it in my pocket, right? So for me, that's going to be a flat back. For you, maybe it's a drop point or a Tonto or whatever. So right off the bat, like, I'm not going to look at a knife if it's has a fat belly knife, right? Like, I can't think of any right now, but a lot of ZT knives, I like ZT. I think it's a great company, and they have some pointy knives too. But a lot of their collab work, they're really fat belly knives for cutting stuff, utility. That's why I don't normally carry an X-Acto knife, right? Because it's a utility blade. Now, second purpose for my knife is utility, and that's why I want to make sure It has a good blade steel, but that's later on down the road. So the number one thing I look at is shape, purpose, size, right? I want to be able to carry it every day, not realize I have it, not feel it, not have it clang against my keys or my wallet or whatever. Secondly, I would say blade material, right? And so you have like the cheap Chinese steels like 8CR, 13 MOV, and then you get to like VG10, 154 CM. Ideally, my perfect carry knife would be CPM S35EN. That to me is my favorite blade steel. It's durable. It's got a good edge retention, right? So it does cost more to make that steel, and that will go, it's one of the things I consider is price. But ultimately, like, how much you're going to use your knife. If you're going to sharpen it. If you like to sharpen your knives, you don't need S35EN, right? You can get away with a cheaper steel VG10, 154 CM, even 8CR 13 MOV, right? So if you're not really hung up on blade retention or sharpening the knife or whatever, then you can settle for a less expensive steel. Along that trait. So secondly, we're talking about material, is handle material. Now, to me, that's largely preference. I like micarta, I like wood, cocobolo, but those things are expensive, right? So material for me, G10 is good. Spyderco uses a lot of G10. What I don't like is, like, I'm looking right now at the Gerber, the mini paraframe. I don't, the knife is like $8. So if that works for you, cool. But I hate that handle. Like, it drives me crazy. It's slippery. It's just a metal skeletonized handle. If you like that, cool. For me, not so much, I don't really care if it's plastic, if everything else in the knife is good. So for example, I'm looking at the Civivi Desert Warrior, the donut one. And the handle material is saying here G10. Wow, it looks like plastic, but yeah, so that's a $75 knife, and I don't really feel like the steel is that good. Nitro V, I've never heard of that. Maybe it's good. A lot of the new steels I don't really keep up with. I kind of have a set, what I like, what I don't like. So for me, S35EN is awesome. CPM. Chris Reeves knives, I love their steel. But anyways, S30V is good. Material, right? So number one, shape, purpose, size. Number two, blade material. So a lot of times when I first started collecting, I just like, oh, that knife looks cool, I'm gonna buy it, right? But the problem with that is, like, why? And later on, you'll figure out when you buy a knife based on looks, as it was for me, I end up not carrying it, or I just end up falling out of love with it because I never loved it to begin with. It was just a lust purchase. So I've had a lot of knives like that. Third thing I look at is deployment. Along with that goes lockup. So I love, for example, we'll go with deployment. I love finger type flip openers. These, like this one right here. And I'll cover this knife in a future video. But a flipper is great. I love thumb studs, thumb holes. Actually, I used to be a big Spyderco thumb hole guy, and I would only carry knives with thumb holes. And then I grew out of that because in order to have a thumb hole, you do have to have a thicker knife. A lot of times, not always. I'd say my least favorite deployment type is like thumb stud. Beyond that, I would say probably like those old timers where you just have to like use two hands and like pry them open. I don't have one here with me, but yeah, anything that requires more than one hand, I'm just not into it. It's a pocket knife, supposed to be, quick to open. So I like flippers. I didn't used to like flippers, but they grew on me, and it makes the knife really compact, easy to open. So along with opening is closing the knife and how it locks up. So my least favorite lockup is like either a liner lock or a ridgeback or a lockback knife. Reason being, I don't know, I just don't like them. They're not fun to close. Although one of my favorite knives is a liner lock. I'll tell you what I do like. I like frame locks, like the Chris Reeves. I like axis locks, like on the Benchmades. Spyderco has some. Kershaw has a Duralock. That's cool. It just makes it easy to open and close, and it's a really secure lockup. So that being said, I'm not like a stickler. Like I won't carry a liner lock. I carry liner locks all the time. They're just not my favorite lockup method, right? So deployment, lockup, and not just that, but how does a knife lock up within the handle? So this isn't a fixed blade, right? So if that lockup fails, you're gonna get cut, right? And that's not what you want. You want to be able to use your knife when you need it the most, right? So fourthly, the thing I look at, and a lot of people are gonna disagree with me on this, I don't really care, it's my preference. I look at country of origin, right? So why do I look at that? My first real pocket knife was a Chinese $20 knife I got at the gun show, and it literally broke on me the next day. And I love that knife. It was cool. It was basically a clone of a Trident. You can look up that knife. It had the like Marine logo on the front. I'm not a Marine. I just thought it was cool. I was like 15 years old. Anyways, from that moment, I learned like, I'm gonna stop buying crappy cheap knives, right? So that being said, does China come out with good knives? Absolutely. Does Taiwan come out with good knives? Yes. But if I had my preference, right, I know that if a knife is made in Japan, more likely than not, it's going to be amazing. Are there faults or defects in Japanese knives? Yes. I'm just saying, like, by and large, you know that if a knife's made in Golden State, Colorado, or Seki City, Japan, that knife's going to be really good, and it's going to hold its value. And it's going to be more expensive, but I got what I wanted. At the end of the day, I wanted a high-quality tool that I could use over and over and over again that will last me a lifetime if I take care of it. Not to say that a Chinese knife won't, but what gets me is like companies like We are made in China and they charge $300-400 for their knives. I'm like, no, like if I'm going to spend that much, I'm going to buy a Chris Reeves knife. Granted, they're a little bit more than that now, but I'm going to buy a Benchmade. I'm going to buy a spyderco. Now, spyderco has a lot of their knives made in Taiwan. And I'm not saying that I won't buy a Chinese knife. I just expect there to be a little bit of a price difference between knives made in China and knives made in Japan or the USA. Why is that? Because inherently, China has a bad reputation. And the way people get bad reputations is by because that's what they're known for, right? So China is known for making faulty products. Now, is everything from their country faulty? No. And like I said, I would still buy a Chinese knife. In fact, one of my favorite knives I carry is a Chinese knife, you know? So the Boker Quaken, you know? But that being said, I want a USA made or Japanese made knife, right? For the money. If I had two knives that were next to me, one was made in Japan, one was made in China, and they're the same price, I'm going to go with one made in Japan. It's a no-brainer. So fifthly, last thing I consider is who makes the knife and how much does it cost, right? And like budget is different for everybody. Like if you don't own any knives and you just want one knife that's going to last you a lifetime, you know, your budget on that could be a lot more. You know, I own, a handful of knives. So I have several knives that will last me a lifetime. I try to stay under $200, but that doesn't always happen. You can have some really great knives for way under $100. But by and large, what I like is good blade material, good country of origin. And I like to stick with Benchmade or Spyderco or, that's pretty much. There's other brands like Chris Reeves. I had a Sabenza once, and, it's just a really nice knife. I ended up selling it to a buddy of mine, and sometimes I regret it, but that was like a $500 knife that I would take with me to go landscaping, and it'd get beat up and scratched, and that's the whole purpose of it, right? But I don't feel like a $500 Sebenza does anything different than a $250 Benchmade, right? I feel like it's the whole law of diminishing returns, right? The more you spend, the less you get. So that Benchmade was just kind of like a flex, a knife flex. And that's cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with a knife flex, right? But for me, I'd rather go buy a Glock or a gun or an AR-15 or whatever, right? A nice watch. And to this day, I think I may in the future buy another Sebenza. But right now, there's so many other things that I want. So I felt like I had $500 tied up in this knife that I liked it. It was cool, but I didn't love it, right? So price is a big factor. Who makes the knife? So let me say this, though. If the knife has the size and the shape that I want, the blade material that I want, the blade handle that I want, you know, all the boxes are checked, and that knife's like $300 or $400, I might pull the trigger on it, especially if I've been thinking about it for 6 months, right? But the thing is, like, it needs to check all the boxes. If it's not going to check all the boxes, then you probably shouldn't waste your money on it. And I learned this lesson early on. Get what you want. In other words, like, if you can't buy it right now, save up for it, you know? And there's nothing wrong with buying a quality tool, right? Because you buy quality tools, you know, later on down the road, you see something else you like, you want to sell it, you get most of your money back. Not all of it, but you get most of it, especially if you took care of it, right? So, again, just to recap on this, and I'll show some images of what I'm talking about, but size, shape, purpose. That's the one thing that I'm thinking about before I buy a knife. Now, right now, I have a knife that fulfills all my needs. It's the Quaken from Boker, and I'll do a review on that later. It was actually a gift, and I love this knife, but, you know, it doesn't have the best blade material. I think it's made in China. It's made by Boker. Boker's all right, but I love that knife. So it's just something about that knife that I really enjoy. It fits in my pocket well, and that goes along with size, right? And the speed of deployment, I think it's on bearings. But anyways, I don't want to do a review on the knife now, but the whole idea there is that all your boxes may not be checked, but you still just may love that knife, right? But you should have some criteria that when you go knife shopping, or when you go staying up late at night till 2 o'clock in the morning, staring at BladeHQ or Knife Center or whatever, eBay, I like eBay too, you gotta watch out for fake knives, that you have something that you're looking for. You're not just like, ooh, that's blue or pink or purple. Like, in my opinion, it's your money, you worked hard for it. So set some guidelines, some rules, some things that you're looking for in a knife before you pull the trigger. And that goes for almost anything, right? And that's what this whole channel is about. It's about the logic involved in making a purchase.